All right, this is going to be a demo tutorial walkthrough, whatever you want to call it, of a photogrammetry workflow, not using ZBrush. So in class, I did a demo with a ZBrush-based workflow. This is a non-ZBrush-based workflow, and I'll show you a couple of different ways you can do this. So here I kind of did a little I don't know, preparation, and I have this table. So this is a little table I made. It's like a dollhouse furniture sized table that I made with some wood and painted it up and scuffed it up to make it look old and kind of dirty. So I was working on this game prototype that is supposed to be kind of like a horror game that looks like a creepy stop motion animation. So I thought it'd be a cool aesthetic to hand make the assets and then photogrammetry and turn them into real-time meshes. So this is one of my tests. Um, so I'll show you real quick. The photos look like this. So these are the photos of the table. And you can see the table was taken on a white background because it's relatively dark. And this is kind of what the photos look like. Now, when I was doing this, I was a little concerned about so the size. You can see a little bit of depth of field with the focus because it's kind of small. Um, that really didn't end up being too much of an issue. I was also concerned because I kept the camera stationary and then I turned the object itself into different passes. When I turned it on its side, I started getting these ground shadows, and I thought that was going to mess up the photogrammetry processing because there's shadows on this one, and then I thought it would get confused, but it actually didn't. So it captured the table anyway. God, hang on. I always forget like how to move stuff in reality capture. There we go. So this is how the table looks, and it did give these kind of like weird artifacts from the shadows, but since they're not connected to the table, I'm pretty sure they can be pretty easily removed. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that real quick. And for this, I didn't do anything special. I opened up a new file. I dragged the images, dropped them over here. I clicked align images. I clicked normal detail and then colorize, and this is where I am. And for this one, so my component has about 4.5 million tries. It'll probably be a little less once I filter this out, which I think is enough detail. So I'm going to just use the vertex colors for the texture, and vertex colors are easy to bake in Substance Painter. So that's what I'm going to do. So let's go to Scene 3D Tools, Advanced. I already have it open. Do I? I do now. Select the largest connected component. So that should be the table. So it's going to select my table. You also can use the lasso if you want to like grab the lasso tool and then kind of hand select some of the stuff. You can do that as well. But this is easy if your model kind of looks like this. And then I'm going to do invert and then filter selection. So it'll filter out what I have selected. So that's gone. And now I'm just left with this model, which I think looks good. Lots of good detail and color. So I'm going to go to mesh model and dense mesh model, and I'm going to export that. So I'm just going to export it as a OBJ. So I'm going to show you a program called Instameshes, which can give you like a low poly from a high poly to start with, and that takes OBJs. So I'm just going to call this table RC for reality capture dot OBJ. And then I'm going to save that. And it's going to say convert. Let's see. So I want vertex colors. Yes. Everything else is probably fine. So, okay. So that's being saved. And then I'm just going to go to Instameshes. So this is a free program that you can find online. If you Google instant meshes, and it looks like this, and it does a pretty good job at giving you a low poly out of a high poly model. So I like to use it sometimes when ZBrush isn't available. For really simple objects, you might want to just hand model it. I can show you that, but this is good for like organic stuff. So I thought I would just show it to you. So I'm going to go to Open Mesh, and it wants an OBJ. Click OBJ, and this is my table RC. Open that. So it's going to open. So here's my table RC OBJ. RC stand for reality capture. Let me see if I can. So there's the table. And so this is pretty self-explanatory. There's a couple of options you can play with. Most of the defaults work pretty well. So 80K for a triangle count is a lot. That's really high. For something like this quality for a game, I'm probably going to take it down. Probably like 1.7 is probably enough. And I'm just going to click solve. So that would kind of like figure out the dimensions and the normals of everything. And then under position fill, solve. So this gives you a preview of what the wireframe would look like, which actually looks pretty good. Since the object is relatively simple in shape, it does a pretty good job. It does put a lot of extra polys on top and on the bottom, even though they're relatively flat. But honestly, like in the end, it's low enough where that doesn't probably matter too much. And if you want to take the time to clean it up, you can. But for something like this, it's low enough resolution that I would just keep it. Because it does just kind of project a grid onto the mesh, so it doesn't really understand nuance of like, well, it doesn't need as many here. It just is sort of evenly distributed by default. So once that's on there, I'm going to go to export mesh, extract mesh. So here's my low poly model. And I'm going to save it. And I saved a test earlier just to make sure that the program was working before I did the video. So I'm just going to save over that test, and that's table im for instameshes.obj, and then save it, and then replace it. Yes. So there it is. There's my high and low. So I'm just going to close that. And now I'm going to open up Blender. I'm going to bring them both into Blender. All right. Delete all this stuff. All right. So let's file import obj and teaching. I'm going to import the high poly and came in on its side, which is fine. I'm going to go up to here and just turn on flat and then texture, or no, attribute. So attribute will show the vertex colors, and I just want to make sure they came in okay. So they came in okay, and there's a decent amount of resolution, which I think is acceptable for what I'm doing. So that's good. And file, import, obj, and this will be the Instamesh one. So Instamesh is that low poly one, and then I will just click import. So there's the low poly and the high poly. So I'm going to turn this back to matcap, just because it's going to make the next step easier. So it's on its side. It doesn't really matter too much with the processing. I do want to put them upright because I want to bake out the ambient occlusion in Substance Painter, and I want it to be kind of proper from like top down. So I am going to adjust it a little bit. So let's do the high poly first. So I'm going to hide the low. And so I'm just going to kind of snap to a couple different views and just kind of fix. I'm not going to fix the pivot point right now. You can do that later when your model is actually finished and it's ready to go into a game. I'm just going to fix the orientation for now. And I'm just going to go from the top, turn on X-ray, and then just kind of rotate on the Z-axis to get this kind of straight this way. And kind of look at it from a few different angles to get it, as straight as I can. And that's probably pretty good. I can always fix the final model later. I just want it kind of upright for baking purposes. So now I'm gonna do the, now they have to be exactly the same orientation. So I'm gonna go to the low poly or the high, and I'm just gonna copy these values. And there could be an easier way to do this, but it's not coming to me off the top of my head. So I'm just gonna do it this way, which isn't that hard, honestly, to do. Just a couple of copy and pastes. Now they are on top of each other, and I'm just going to Control A and apply the rotation so they're kind of zeroed out. And we're good to go. So there are the two tables. Now what I need to do is I will need to unwrap. I will need to unwrap the low poly. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Since this is an advanced class, I kind of assume that you know how to unwrap. So I'm just going to pause it and get that unwrapped. And then we'll go from there. All right, so I have the low poly unwrapped. So there it is. It's a pretty okay unwrap. Could be a little tighter, but I'm kind of trying to speed things up. Also, some of the legs are rotated in different orientations to fit better. I'm just gonna do baking, so I don't really care about that. If you want to add to the texture or you know, kind of like make your own thing or modify it, you might want to think about orientation of your UV islands, but this will work. All right, so that's done. So here's the high poly. Now something I do want to do is I want to smooth this model. So I'm just going to do shade smooth, and it's going to look all gummy. But this will help with baking, and it'll kind of help with baking seams where the UVs are. So I think it'll work out pretty well. Although I do, what is this? Oh, so here's a little mess up here, I noticed. So let me fix that. So I'm just gonna go do that. It's kind of a weird polygon, which happens sometimes. So that's good. And so I'm just gonna export these two as FBXs so I can bring them into Substance Painter. So also, actually, before I do that, so I used Instameshes, but you can also model by hand if you want to. So I could technically come in here with the high poly, and I could make a cylinder, and you know, I could add the appropriate edges and things I want to it. So you can kind of do this if you want to, kind of hand model. I know some of you have objects that are a little like, you might want to kind of do it this way, especially if you're doing something really hard surface. And this would probably be fine. I do things like this sometimes, especially if they're more hard surface, because the more hard surface stuff, you have more control over like the wireframe and the smoothing and all that kind of stuff. So, so you could kind of model a top and get it to fit as close as you want. And then you would do the same for like, get like a box and kind of model it and get it to fit as close as you can. I'm going to turn the high poly off for a second. And then, because from here, you know, you might want to add some polys in for the top. Also, like, this could be more efficient. So Instameshes just makes kind of like this even grid. And for like the top and the bottom, you don't really need all those polys there. So this could be technically more efficient. I'm just gonna kind of speed this up a little bit. So speed that up, and just kind of get rid of these cross I don't know if this is actually faster or not. It feels faster. And then Control X to get rid of those. And yeah, so just coming across. So I don't. So you can see just kind of building like a little grid. Um, this probably is not going to be faster because I'm going to have to select a lot of edges. But oh, okay, hang on. Ugh, my keyboard shortcuts aren't working. That's fine. I'll just do this manually. So take these off. Actually, I don't know if this is faster now, but this is the way I ended up doing it. And then Control X. So now we have a nice grid on top. And you could do the same for the bottom. And you can model it up. I probably would also probably would select like the edges, like the top and bottom edges. I'll just do the bottom for now, just to save time. And turn this on. So kind of move that up. You might want to do a small bevel. A small bevel. Actually, let's see. Hold on. Let's open up. Yeah, so the scale's wonky. Let's just apply the scale, the rotation and scale. And then I can get a nice even bevel. Turn on that. Yeah, it's not really doing what I wanted to do. Kind of move that up. But yeah, you can kind of get like a little bevel going, so you can get a little more like, you know, tighter with it. And so you would just basically model like this on top of the high poly. And then once you have it kind of like the way you like it, you can use like a shrink wrap, which works pretty well. So that would be in deform and shrink wrap. And then this would just be the high poly one. And then if you apply and then take a look at it, so you can see kind of shrink wraps to it. And this is also another method if you want to really control the model, or if you have something hard surface, because sometimes hard surface stuff with photogrammetry will get kind of gummy. So you could model like this and keep sort of the nice smooth integrity, and then bake out the colors and stuff. So anyway, so that's kind of like another workflow you could do, and you could skip Instameshes and ZBrush and just kind of do it this way. Whatever you're most comfortable with. So let me just select a low poly and let's start exporting those. Unwrapped. So this will be, I guess I gotta do this. Table LP for low poly. Selected objects and apply transformation, and then face smoothing, and then export. And then turn that off. And then export this, export FBX. And this will be table HP for high poly. Settings still are there, so I'll export that. And this will take a second because it's a couple million. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna open up Substance Painter. Have all these 3D programs open. All right, so Substance Painter. So I'm using there's a ton of different ways you can bake maps. You can use XNormal, you can use Marmoset, you can use Substance Designer, Substance Painter. You can do it in Blender. So you could set up a bake right here in Blender if you want to. You can investigate different ways to do it. I'm doing it in Substance Painter because that's what we use in class. That's what everyone has access to. And it gives you an opportunity. You can use, this isn't a substance painter class either, so I'm not gonna go too far into it, but you can use it to create like a roughness map and do some extra work in here for all of your different textures. So file and new, and then 2048 is probably fine. So table low poly, make sure this is turned off. Okay. You could do 4098 if you want as well. And then just kind of like downsize if you need to. And mine was automatically, so I use a lot of Unreal, so mine's on the Unreal format, but you can change that. You all know how to change that. So there's that. So let's bake it out. So let's go to bake mesh maps, and I'm going to do 4098, and where it says high poly, I'm going to choose the poly. So there's that, and it's going to kind of load a cage here in a second. So here's the cage. Red means it's not lined up. It's missing. Actually, the high poly has this kind of lump it's not catching. I'm going to increase that a little bit. Hopefully, you don't want to do too much because then all the pieces will overlap, as you can see. So I'm going to do just enough where the red is gone. And hopefully it's not oversecting or overlapping too much. If the bake looks good, I'll move forward. If the bake doesn't look good and these are kind of bleeding into each other, I might go back and fix that little lump on the low poly so it matches closer, but I think this will work. So then once that's done, so anti-aliasing, this will smooth the result. By default, it's off, which is fine for now. So I'm going to go to ID and switch this to vertex color. So that'll grab the vertex colors from the high poly, and I can use that as a texture. So let's do super sampling. This makes it probably take longer, but let's just do bake textures. All right, so it's done baking all the maps. Also, I forgot to mention I did keep all of these turned on. So you can use these for all the different generators and effects and tools in a Substance Painter, which is good for if you want to modify the texture, add to the texture, if you want to, create a roughness map or whatever. So I'm just going to go to return to paint mode. So here it is. It looks like it baked out pretty good. So the low, the high, I'm getting all the detail I want. Nice scratches on the table, all the little imperfections. So I like how it looks. I'm going to create a new fill layer, and I'm just going to set the roughness, set the roughness to just really rough so that I could just see the color, and then go to base color, and I'm going to search for color map, which is what Substance Painter will name by default. And so now that's on the model. So there we go. I have the color map on there. The ambient occlusion is pretty dark. It's pretty dark. Oh man, it's really dark. I don't know if let me just kind of shine that light down there, or if I can get the light. Yeah, I guess I could mess with that if I wanted to. So here's my mesh maps, and then here's the ambient occlusion. Actually, it doesn't look that bad, honestly, from looking at the map. And if I take it off, it doesn't really make much of a difference. So I guess I'll just keep it on. I guess that's just the nature of the object and the lighting and Substance Painter. But anyway, so I'm not going to spend too much time fussing about that. So here's the model, the low poly. I got the texture, the normal map. Everything's good to go. From here, you could create your own roughness map if you want to, and add to it whatever you want to add to it. And then once you're done, you just go to File, and you will go to Export Textures. So I didn't change the name of my material in Blender, so I probably should have done that. So I should have named the low poly here its default material because actually it's not turned on. That's why it's not. So I probably should have put a material here and named it so that it wasn't default material here. I kind of messed that up. But from here, I mean, you can change whatever you need to change settings wise. So it's set to the Unreal output template, and you can change this. So Unreal packed means you get like the base color, and then the roughness, ambient, and metallic are combined into one image with the different color channels. You can change that if you want. Here you would save like where you want the images to go on your computer, and you just click export. It'll create all the textures for you. So this has no metal in it, so I just take off metallic. I would take off emissive because I don't need emissive. Actually, no, I do need this because this is that roughness metallic combined map. So I don't have any roughness here, but if I wanted to make one, it would be there. I don't need emissive because there's no like emissive or glowing bits. And then you can change the size if you want to keep it 4096 or you want to drop it. You can change the size here, and then you export the textures, and you can put them on your model. So in Blender, like this is kind of like the one that I'm using to baking. I would probably duplicate this one, and then I would call this table exp, which is my export table. And then from here, I would actually change, like, I would move this to the ground so that when I put it into a game, it would just kind of, the pivot is here in the center. Actually, you know what I would do? I would go to object, set origin to geometry, which will put it in the center. And then I would, no, I wouldn't do that. This is what I would do. Sorry, I'm going to turn off that one. I would go into edit mode and then just move the object kind of to the middle and where the feet are touching the bottom. And then, so there's my cursor. It's already in the origin. If it's not, you can go to Shift S and cursor to world origin, and then just do object origin to 3D cursor. So now the pivot of my object is kind of there. So if I drop it in a game, it'll be in the right spot, and then it rotates correctly. So this would be my exported version. And then, like I said, I would put a proper material on this, whatever naming scheme you have, and export this to whatever game engine you want and put on your textures, and you're good to go. So hopefully this is helpful, and let me know if you have any questions.